In this video, we're going to talk about takt, steering, and control, but specifically about leveling work. So it's one thing to design a takt plan, it's completely another story to create flow out in the field. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Stay with us. Okay, so when we talk about takt, steering, and control, what we mean is, hey, you've got this production system that you've designed. Now what we need to do is make sure that the train is flowing, the train on the tracks are flowing, and that everything out ahead on the tracks ahead are cleared out of the way, and that environment is controlled and safe for the train to flow. So that's called takt, steering, and control. So what I want to talk about today are some things that you might experience and what to do about them. So when you're implementing your takt plan out on the project site, if you ever come up with a situation where when your trades are going through different zones, they are not experiencing a leveled amount of work, then you need to adjust the takt zones. So first of all, you already know that if you have zones, we do not make these zones equal area or equal square feet or equal square meters. That's not how we do it. Your zones would probably look something more like this, right? So if you had a zone over here with more density in the work, then this zone would be smaller because we want to equal these by work density, not by area. Okay, so your trade should be flowing through here and experience a similar amount of work in each of these scenarios. If they don't, and let's say that every trade that comes through your zones is experiencing a problem in this zone, then maybe the density is not balanced right? Maybe this one is correct, but this is a little bit too, or a little bit less dense, a little bit too dense, so this is your bottleneck. You may want to adjust the boundary of that zone and pick up a little bit more work inside this zone so that when they do come in here the second time, similar amount of work, ooh, that's nice, that's not like a bottleneck anymore, similar amount of work, and they can flow beautifully through there. So all we did was adjusted the takt zone boundary for us to have optimal flow. So that's one of the things that you can do in order to help you to create flow in the field. The other thing that you can do is to level your trades. We've already talked about in previous videos how your trades get to flow through here evenly. Here's what I'm talking about. Let's say that you want to package a series of trade partners in here, and let's say the shape of the box represents how long it takes to do the work, okay? You already know from previous videos that if you went from zone 1 to zone 2 to zone 3, that this is what it would look like. Okay, you've got a nice cascade on that first one, but if the resource can only handle so much work, that bottleneck is going to put you at a different line of balance or a different rhythm on the end, and then that last wagon, there's going to be a gap, right, from here to here and from here to here, and we're going to get out of flow. So one of the things we can do is really take a look at leveling the way we package our wagons, our resources, in order to get a better scenario here. So here's what we would do. If you had that scenario with those same trade partners, right, where this wagon was bigger, there's a couple things. Well, actually, there's probably a whole lot, but I'll just give you a couple. You can improve the work. So I'm just going to write improve. And what I mean by that is if the work is improved or the process is refined and the overall cycle time can reduce, then maybe that wagon can narrow a bit. The other thing that you can do is split it. And we've talked about this before. If you have, like, let's say a large 10-person crew, perhaps you can split that up into two 5-person crews. And this is what that would look like, is that this would become crew number 1. For that scope, this would become crew number 2, all trained with proper supervisors. And then, like you have seen before, you have that nice trade flow. Oops, that's not a very good arrow. That nice trade flow, and you don't have any bottlenecks in the system, right? The other thing is you could pay for another trained crew. And I talk a lot about not, what do I want to call it? Not overloading the project with utilization or rushing and pushing and panicking people or just randomly adding people. But I do not have a problem with paying for an additional crew ahead of time, because then they can be trained, they can be onboarded, they can be focused, everything can be pieced out exactly the way it needs to be. So again, we do not want this scenario where as this cascades, this becomes the bottleneck. So you can either improve it to shorten the duration, you can split that crew into two, or you can add another crew. There's probably 3 or 4 other really good ideas here. But when you want to level, this is definitely something that you should consider. Another thing I want to talk about is leveling within your wagons themselves. So when we do our Takt production system course, we will typically give them boxes, and what these boxes will represent is one representative zone and then the takt time, okay? And what we'll find out in here is that, okay, you've got one crew that has 3 days of work and they're doing totally fine, okay? Let me go ahead and use red because this is the example. We usually have fire sprinkler, and the problem is that they only have a 2-day duration within each of these wagons. And we always do a stacking comparison, meaning that I don't want to draw on the wall over here, that we will stack it on another zone and see how we flow in the diagonal. So this first trade right here has beautiful, nice flow, okay? But we have a problem over here. If the fire sprinkler contractor does their work and then goes to the other zone on a 3-day takt time, because that's what this is, it's on a 3-day takt time, then they don't have flow. They're on the project, away, on the project, away. So the key here is you may have to level the actual worker counts inside the actual crews themselves. So let me just say one thing first of all before we go. This is a takt time based approach, okay? That's where we're fitting everything into that takt time. You also can take what's called a resource based approach, and what that would look like is that you don't have to fit them in the wagons. For instance, in this example, the concrete crew could actually split these out and do their work a bit faster, so they're really on a 1-day takt time. You could also say once the fire sprinkler contractor starts, that they could stay on a 2-day takt time and have their own beautiful flow. Then when you get into the wagons that needed 3 days, then it can go onto your 3-day takt time. So really, especially because this is at the front, before you hit your 3-day, you can just go ahead and run these at their own pace. This is called a multi-train takt plan, and it's resource-based. But if you do want to keep it takt time based, then one of the things that you could do is crew this trade down. So they had a 4-person crew. You could talk to the trade partner and say, hey, what if we went down to a 3-person crew, right? 2 people up on lifts, 1 person feeding materials, as long as it's not too heavy. Is this possible? And you might find out, yeah, okay, we could go to a 3 or a 2-person crew. And then that would extend their duration. So then they do their work, they flow to the next zone, do their work, flow to the next zone, do their work. You get the point. So one of the things you might need to do when leveling is actually look at the labor counts within the wagons themselves, within the activities themselves. And one of the last things that I want to mention in this video is adjusting so that you have buffers. And I do want you to know that when it comes to leveling, there's so much more to it. There are so many other things that you can do to level the work on your project site. You can level resources, you can level information flow, you can level all of your subtasks inside of these wagons themselves. You can do a lot of leveling, but the point is, what we want to do is even out everything when it comes to how the work is done through zones, how the work is done within the crews themselves, how information flows, how materials arrive. Everything needs to be leveled, but these are some of the main concepts. What you want to end up with from a leveling perspective is that if a crew has, and I'll draw it like this, if a crew has 3 days to do their work, you don't want them and maybe I'll get another color marker. You don't want them to, from a crew's perspective, go right up to the end date and get into a situation where there is possibly a chance where they would go over. Meaning, if they had a delay or experience variation, they would go past their time. That's just going to rush and push and panic them. That's why I always talk about this relationship, that when you have a activity duration for a crew, your activity duration actually is right here. It needs to be a portion of the overall time, because you are going to also experience variation, which I'll symbolize with a V, and you're going to experience low productivity, especially if you have new people. So you want to keep that relationship in mind. And if you have this scenario where you've filled up 3 days with 3 days of work and that's it, and you've sized your crew that way, then you could get in trouble if you run into a problem along the way, which I would say you definitely will. Every crew experiences variation. Every crew experiences times when they have lower productivity. So from a leveling standpoint, what we want to see is an activity inside their takt time, or whatever their duration is, where their activity takes so long, and actually I'll just draw it like this, because you get my point, where the activity does take up a good portion of the time, but they do have a nice little buffer in here. Now, the buffer isn't, oh my gosh, we're going to sit around with lawn chairs and start drinking beer, although I wouldn't have a problem with that if you did it on my side, as long as you weren't on the property. But once the activity is done, you're going to train your workers. Who thinks that we couldn't use more of that? We could clean. We could organize. Okay, I'll do that, ORG. We could make sure that we're finishing and inspect the area and demobilize. This buffer, if we do actually finish here and we don't experience a delay in between, is going to be used for these useful things that will be needed in the future. And if we do experience a problem, you'll need that time anyway. So remember that when you are packaging and leveling, always to enable your crew a bit of a buffer. We do not want to rush and push and panic people. So these are some of the main concepts when it comes to leveling. I hope that you're able to employ these in the field when you implement your takt plan, and just let us know if you ever need any help. We're only a phone call or an email away. We help clients with this. We do this. We can work with your project teams. Whatever you need, we're your partner. Let us know. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On we go.